Hey everyone, it's Alec Crawford, your host for the AI Risk Reward podcast. And our very special guest today is Kodjo Hogan, Information Security Risk and Compliance Executive. Welcome, Kodjo.
Thanks for having me, Alex. And it's a great day to be here. Super excited to sit down and chat with you about AI and other things that come about.
Awesome. Hey, as a computer science fellow early adopter, what was your first computer?
The very first computer I ever touched was the Apple IIe at River East Elementary School, um, and I haven't gone back since.
Yeah, nice. It was the first color one, and I started out with a Trash 80 in 1979. That was not color, and it was 16K. So we come a long way. And when I say K to people, they're like, "You mean Meg?" And I'm like,
Like, no.
"No." You mentioned The Alchemist to me as a book that made an impact,
Yes.
which I've also read. Pitch our listeners on that.
So, The Alchemist is a book written by Paulo Coelho. It's about a young boy. I believe his name is Santiago. I think that he only names him once inside of the book, and he has this dream, and he has his successive dream like three times, and then he finally says, "I'm going to go and figure this out." To go like, what is going on? And he gets set back so many times during like the minute he steps, he's in he lives in Spain, and he goes to the Arab coast of Africa, and in the minute he like lands in the city, he gets robbed. And so then he goes through all these trials and tribulations, and he finally makes it to where he's trying to go, and then he kind of gets robbed again. And then he finally makes it to the destination. But it's about all these lessons that you pick up in the journey. And the biggest thing that stuck out to me was two lessons: is that you only really fail when you stop trying, and sometimes the lesson is the perseverance, and it's not the destination is how it changes you. But there's this story within the story where he asked about a valuable lesson that you can take with you. And it's a long analogy that he talks to the wisest man in the land. His father set the adjacent story, or the story within the story, is that this guy, his father sets him up with this the wisest man in the land, and he goes to meet him, and then he says, "Hey," he was like, "I'm kind of busy right now." He says, "But I want you to do something while you wait." He gives him a spoon of oil, and he said, "Go see my castle, but don't drop any oil." And so he walks through this guy's castle, and he doesn't drop any oil. And then he comes back to the wise man, and the wise man is like, "Hey, what did you think of my castle?" He was like, "I didn't notice." He was like, "I was too focused on the oil." So he says, "Okay, I want you to go back and really, take it in." So he comes back, he goes around, he says, "Well, what do you think of the castle?" You say, "Oh, I loved your hanging gardens. I loved your library. I loved your musicians. I loved the food." He said, "But where's the oil?" And he says, "Oh, I dropped it." And he says, "Well, one of the key secrets to life is being to take it all in while keeping your eye on oil." And it took me years to really interpret what that meant. And it was about focusing on what's important, but not losing sight of what's going on around you. And as an information security professional, I think a lot of times we tend to lose focus on what is really important, or we lose focus on what's going on around you. And you kind of have to be immersive and flexible in a way that lends to both.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, it's a great book for those who have not read it. So obviously you brought up cybersecurity. What first got you interested in cybersecurity, Kojo?
So, great question. So I come at the information security professional profession adjacent. I started out as a long time ago as an accountant working on Wall Street doing what was then called exotic trade derivatives. And then I went into operations management. I did some call center operations, and none of that stuff really got me out of bed. I had one role where I was doing expense budget management for IT department, and I took it upon myself to learn a little bit more about this enormous amount of spend that they were doing. And one of the guys that I worked with, I said, how can I learn more about this? And he said, there's tons of classes you can go to. He said, you already have an MBA, so it's obvious you know how to study. So I went and I just learned, and I said, how do I do this? And I was like, and is it too late? He said, it's not too late. He said, you just have to figure out where you're at and what people need and close the gap. So I took a gap year, and I went and I studied. I got a lot of certifications. I took a lot of classes. I didn't go to university, but I took, university level classes in information security. Why I started taking out Network Plus, and then when we got to the security module, I said, "Oh, this is really interesting." And then I just kind of went down that track. I had a lot of support from people inside of the community who, mock interviewed me, and this is 2017, and so I was just interviewing, and I finally landed at a Japanese bank called Sumitomo Mitsui Trust Bank, and it's been up and up ever since then.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so important. I think, unfortunately, it tends to be under-resourced, right? Which puts a lot of stress on people, in the business. And then, of course, institutions or banks or whatever, only when it's too late, are they like, oh, we should have paid attention more, right?
Right, right. And and the other side of it is also is that, information security professionals know how important it is. But what's lost is, keep an eye on what's going on around you. And I find that a lot of times information security professionals will talk past the business. And you were like, "Hey, did you understand that?" And they're like, "Yes." And they're like, "Great, we're gonna get this budget approved for half a million, $1 million." And they're like, "No, we're not paying for any of that because we don't have the business rationale." We're like, "But we just had the conversation." So it can be it is a feedback loop, and you have to make sure it's a positive one um, that I've learned.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's think about it like buying insurance. Like no one wants to pay the insurance premiums. They just know they need to be have the insurance in case something bad happens. But sometimes they don't like to talk about it. So you did mention Charles Coker to me, your first boss, and
Mhm.
how he was such an amazing person. So just talk about that a little bit.
So Charles Coker was the type of person who understood that in order to create really good information security professionals, you had to step away from the tooling and you had to understand the framework first. And so he spent a lot of time making sure that his employees understood the frameworks and the methodologies and the why. So even though I was a hybrid of an information security engineer as well as an information security risk manager, he made sure I understood both of them. And it was a very immersive, like the first 12 months were very, very learning because I was learning risk management as well as information security engineering, which is very difficult at the best of times, but to do both back to back it was hair pulling. But once I started getting it, I was like, oh, this is actually starting to make sense. And 2 jobs later, I remember calling him up. I said, I never really understood this formula that you gave me until I had to teach it. And he just got a chuckle. He says, the best way to know if you know something is to go teach somebody else who doesn't know anything about it. So I was like, yeah. And I just, always very appreciative of everything that he gave me because I still utilize it today.
Yeah, that's totally true. If you want to really learn something, learn how to teach it. So, back to cybersecurity. What's the biggest misconception people have about cybersecurity and AI, and how does it impact the industry's evolution, do you think?
Hmm. I feel like this is a troublemaker question.
Hey, I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble, but
I think the biggest misconception of cybersecurity coming in is that people or the business has to do what you say. Just because you say this thing needs to be protected, you have to, that they're going to listen, that, it's going to be, you hit the red buzzer and then all of a sudden it's DEFCON 5 and everybody's running around with binders and action plans. And it very rarely happens like that. A lot of cybersecurity is based on governance, risk, and compliance. So understanding the governance, risk, and compliance framework gives you that why. And a lot of times, the information security professionals, we split it out. So we split out the GRC from the engineering, and it's better if one person does both of them because you understand the compliance mandate, and then you're buying the tooling to not only secure the environment but also comply with the regulations, and then you can actually tell that story. So what tends to happen is that you have somebody, or you could have a SOC engineer who's looking for these alerts, but they don't know why, or they know that they're doing something to protect the business, but they don't know why, or the engineer, they want to use Copilot, or any of the other assistive coding projects, and then, it comes down that you can only use it in the sandbox, uh, or you can only use it very limited, and they don't understand why. And you try and explain it to them, and it's not explained very well because they're not information security risk managers, compliance and regulation. So it's that's the biggest misconception that a lot of people get, um, in my opinion. The second biggest misconception is how exciting it is. It's like, you don't want, it can be extremely exciting, but you don't want back to back to back to back incidents. That's very draining. In fact, as you progress in your career, you want no incidences, because that means you have typically a well secured, well complied organization. So you don't want, back-to-back audits. You don't want back-to-back incidents. You don't want back-to-back-to-back debriefs. You want a stable operation. And that's, the series of success. You're not going to be sitting there out typing some hacker that, there's a grid going across the screen. They're getting in, they're coming into the back door. That doesn't happen. You want a very stable, calm, quiescent environment where you can actually get some work done and continuous improvement.
Yeah, it's funny. What they say about commercial pilots is it's years of boredom interspersed with moments of terror. So let's hope that's not your career as a cybersecurity risk and compliance executive.
But
Um,
but I didn't actually ask a question about AI, the AI risk. So the biggest misconception about AI risk is the malicious code that's coming out. AI can code it cheaper and faster, but it's not as intuitive as live hackers. Where they're doing these massive, amazing payloads, like sending it off. These works of art that you're like, wow, like who would have thought? The biggest risk that comes from AI is being able to do psychological profiling on targets and do custom tailored phishing net scams to target networks. And now that ChatGPT 4.0 can actually search the internet and get feedback on targets, it's become even scarier.
oh, absolutely. And you can just download someone's LinkedIn profile into ChatGPT and it'll write them a personal letter. Like so.
You don't have to download anymore. You can just ask it
Yeah,
to
it'll just search.
do
Yeah, that's fair.
it.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Sometimes there are places that ChatGPT just won't access for whatever
Right.
reason. But now, is there obviously, look, you were talking about regulation around cybersecurity, and look, sometimes regulations are really important to have, right?
Mhm.
Because sometimes you literally can't get budget until you go to the CEO or the COO or your boss and go like, look, there's a rule, like, like we have to do this, right?
Right.
But obviously some can be counterproductive or may sound good on paper, but in practice are not great.
Right.
Is there anything like that that you're aware of or that you would highlight for our listeners?
So one is that NIST rolled back their change your password policy every 90 days, and they just said put in multi-factor authentication. Uh, because it was one of those things that you change it every 90 days, and then people forget, and then they're going back. After a certain amount of passwords, they're back at the one that they want anyway. So it kind of defeated the purpose. So I think information security, cybersecurity is an evolving thing. And sometimes regulations are there to protect, but you have to. One thing that people don't realize is that regulations as a baseline is just a guidepost. These things are written with in mind, 2 to 5 years out. Like um, NIST uh, NIST 800-53 R6 is probably being written now and probably won't be out for the next 3 to 5 years. So then that takes us to 2028, looking at threats and vulnerabilities that were being impactful in 2024, 2025. And then, you're putting in these guidelines, and these are just old, they'll be outdated practice by then. Like, who knows? I mean, we have quantum computing real time right now. And AI real time right now. So it's just like, okay, well, who knows what we'll be, trying to defend against then. So you have to look at what controls make sense and what regulations make sense for your environment. And sometimes you want to take the regulatory control as is, but sometimes you want to say, okay, it makes better sense to do these three things to accomplish this one thing, or because it allows the freedom and flexibility of innovation with the business, which goes back to that story about, really keeping what's important, keeping in mind what's important inside of the environment. You got the oil and you got the business. You have to keep things safe, but make sure you know what's going on around you.
Yeah, totally. So, look, we talked about spear phishing with AI or ChatGPT, which is absolutely happening. What do you think is the biggest myth being perpetuated about AI's capabilities in enhancing cybersecurity today?
That AI, Gen AI, agentic AI is going to destroy jobs. I don't think it's going to destroy jobs. I think what it's going to do is that it's going to cause the people who have a passion for cybersecurity to upskill and uplevel, because it'll be more of a guidance. It's I'm a big Trekkie. I've seen almost every single episode. Well, that's not true. I haven't watched all of Deep Space Nine, but all the rest of them I've pretty much seen. Oh, and Star Trek Discovery. Just finished Lower Decks last night, which was really good. But it's like a tactical computer where you're targeting and you're putting in guidance, and you have to continuously update. AI, it works on a receptive feedback loop. You have to continue to train a model, almost like a puppy. Like, I want this puppy to do this thing when I say
Hmm.
fetch or, kneel or beg or lay down. But you have to continuously reinforce that. Every single model does this, and as the environment changes, you have to train the model. So what's happened is that what's going to happen is that people who are wanting to use or not upskill and continuously learn about what's going on in the environment, the AI models will be able to do those types of jobs. What
Yeah.
those are, not quite sure yet, but they will be able to do those types of jobs. And the people who really do the deep learning and can guide the AI models and look at the anomalous events, because of AI tends to deal with um, outliers and baselines. So the baseline means this, the outliers mean that, and so being able to help AI differentiate between the two. So I think that's how it's going to help move the industry forward.
So besides the parable of the spoon of oil, is there some advice you would give yourself at the start of your cybersecurity career?
I would, the advice that I would give anybody at the start of their career: really understand why you want to do this. Um, and for me, I always wanted to be like Batman, and then I am the knight, I'm in the background, and I knew going in it was going to be a largely a thankless task. So I was, dead on with that. But I think the biggest advice I would have done was I would have said, once you get your stride, make sure you get out there and network and you see what other people are doing so that you can bring it back to your organization and improve. I think I was too insular when I first started. And, even though Charles used to tell me, you got to go to these conferences, you got to go, there's dinners coming up. You should go after work and just see what's going on. And I really didn't start doing that until this year. And it's been like phenomenal, like just to see like, okay, I was right about this, or that this seems to be going along. And I'm like, I don't know about that. And, just, bucking the trend and just kind of seeing where I'm at. But also it allows you to speak the language, especially with me coming outside of the business. It allows me to speak the language of the profession more, where people are not trying to figure out or interpret what I'm saying, but, really getting the message and speaking the nomenclature of the group per se.
Yeah, that is great advice. Honestly, I think a ton of jobs on the internet or LinkedIn are just fake or already taken and they're still up there. And it's just all about networking and, meeting people and really creating legitimate relationships as opposed to online relationships, which may or may not be so awesome. Um, so tell us about some stuff that you use AI for right now, either professionally or personally.
So for AI, AI has really good use cases. So I was trying to tune AI to do predictive analytics on the stock market, which I think everybody's doing. It didn't work out so well.
Mhm.
But hey, I gave it a week. And they'll tell you what inputs you need to do and like how often you need to update it. So I used one ChatGPT model, and I just said, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. What do you need from me? And it kept on refining his answer. And I would ask it to rate itself. And then, how do we do better tomorrow was always the question. And so there's a lot of volatility in the stock market. So, and it's not able to curate or comb all that data right now, but hey, maybe in the future. And that's more because where I work at now, AI isn't out in the wild. But quasi professionally is continuously to learn about the models, learn about the risk associated with other people are seeing, and staying up to date on the standards and regulations, so that when it does get released into the environment where I'm at, I'm better equipped to help mitigate risk and put controls around it.
Yeah, that sounds great. Are there any standards out there yet for cybersecurity professionals around securing large language models?
There's
Or is
ISO dropped a guidance on it, and it's on the tip of my head. NIST has not, but ISO they just released the AI. Hold on one second. Um,
and there's also the NIST AI risk management framework, which is not strictly cybersecurity. It's more about using the models. But
exactly, and so ISO is 2289, uh, and that's the AI concepts and terminology. But then you have guidance on AI risk management, which is 23894. And then ISO 38507, which is governance for AI. So ISO, they've done a lot of work in a very short amount of time and put it out at rapid pace on, AI governance and, how to look at it in risk management, which is probably going to become the gold standard for regulation, which means that you're going to have to do a lot of additional work to make sure it works for your organization.
yeah, exactly. And what concerns you about AI and large language models out there in the world?
Yeah, what concerns me the most from an organizational perspective is how do you keep the data secure and how do you keep the access, limited, which is why I like your product. And this is not a golden egg, or this is not an Easter egg where Alec asked me to talk about it at all. But it's like, we have this thing, and nowhere, no other program would you just release into your environment the way people are releasing AI into their environment, and the ability to sandbox and monitor AI modules, AI inputs, outputs, data going in, I think is fantastic. And when people talk to me about AI threats, I always talk about your product, because I say, we had the two biggest threats of the 2020s is COVID and AI. Um,
Wow. Wow.
and nobody was prepared for it. But I think that you guys are on the front runners to be, a leading force in saying, okay, this is what AI risk management looks like.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. And what AI developments do you see coming that perhaps others do not over the next couple years? I mean, there's been some amazing progress the last couple years, and what are we going to
Yeah.
see?
So what I actually predicted handheld AI, generative AI modules. In the very first podcast I did, cyber risk podcast, salesman, having a sales mentality for your risk management program, where I
Hmm.
talked about how the the generative AI agents were going to become smaller, and the computing processes of the chips were going to
Hmm.
be, we're going to be faster, and it was going to allow um, stronger AI models to operate with or in smaller devices. So I think the biggest things that scares me is with the onset of quantum computing. If we look at the microprocessor, it came out in about what, 68 to 72, and we're that's 50 years later, and we are something like a million times faster than those first chips that came out. And if you think about quantum computing, we're being able to design your own chips using the processing power of those computing tubes, plus with generative AI, agentic AI assisting. I think that we're going to have leaps and bounds in computing and processing power over the next 10 years. I think we're going to be able to do things that we've never even imagined in the palm of our hand. So I just think the world needs to get ready for it. And I think that, uh, the the biggest thing that AI is going to be able to do is take over a lot of repetitive tasks, things that we don't even know that we don't like to do. AI will be able to just do it for us. Based on biometric scanners, the Internet of Things is already ready, but it's just a matter of curating the data and having a data stream that is quick enough to process the power, and then AI to have its multivariate processing thought, and the neural network on a quantum chip. With these things coming in, who knows? It's going to be the sky's the limit.
Very cool. And just switching gears here a little bit, just in terms of some advice, like what are some of your favorite reads or podcasts to stay up on AI news or cybersecurity news?
So the first thing I read every single morning is TLDR. It's a curated it's a curated list of what's going on in the world. Apple News is pretty good. Wired is pretty good. I read ISAC. They're really good, and I look at a lot of things that goes on LinkedIn. So that's the one thing I do tell a lot of people is that curate your feed so that you know what's going on in the world, rather than just relying on one source. People who you think are good, people you think are bad. There's a lot of publications out there: Hacker Halted, TLDR, Apple News, Wall Street Journal. You just have to tune into the technology section and just read.
Yeah, good advice. How about conferences? We obviously met at the C Vision conference,
Right.
but what other conferences do you like for cybersecurity or AI?
So I think CVision does a really good job. I think Apex Assembly does a really good job. There is those two are great. The Orders Club does a good job for having discussions. I think those are my top three right now.
Cool, that's great. And what else? I mean, we've talked about a lot of stuff, but what else can companies do today to protect themselves when they're allowing their employees to use large language models, hopefully internally?
It was funny. I wrote something on LinkedIn yesterday that a lot of, I was looking at a pitch from this company, and they were talking about, gamification and AI models. And I thought all that was great. But I think that the biggest lesson I've always learned in driving a lesson home is to educate your employee on risks, not only in your professional life, but in your personal life. So, teaching people about the AI risk to the workplace is great. But if you sandwich that with the AI risk to your personal life and like, okay, we're going to give you these two techniques and procedures to mitigate risk at work, but you can also use these at home. And then leaving with, protect the business by protecting yourself. It shows that bi-directional relationship because, if AI breach or AI leakage, or not even that, but you could have a bad LLM that's giving you proprietary code or proprietary work that there's an artist or there's a coder out there who says, hey, I didn't license this to these guys, now they own a piece of your IP. That can be scary. So just making sure that they know about those risks and educating them and saying, this also goes into copyright law and copyright infringement in your personal life. Make sure that you're not borrowing things that are illegal, kind of like, I don't know if you're old enough to remember Napster, with all the people that were getting,
Yeah,
sued
that was
for the
crazy. Yeah,
download.
that was crazy. And then last piece of advice, what advice do you have for bank or other financial institution CEOs about adopting Gen AI? Like, what do they need to think about?
So I think that um, they have to think about when they do this adoption that, when you look at Gen AI is a great efficiency efficiency increaser. And so, if you're going to build your own Gen AI, you're going to use off the shelf Gen AI, you can use limiters where, it's going to look for PII, PHI, big secrets. But, for, responding to emails quicker, writing emails, doing analysis of large sets of data where, it will normally take somebody, 2 or 3 hours, and then putting together a brief summary. I think that's the way to go. But saying that, and these test models have to be done, and they have to be done rapidly because if you look at the bank solutions that we have now, banks thrive on settlements and holdings, custodial holdings. And when I worked at a blockchain company, one of the great flatteners of the world is blockchain technology. It's instantaneous settlement. It's a fraction of the cost that banks use. So right now, you could theoretically spin up a banking like institution, aka a blockchain exchange, pay somebody interest, and store banks there and and execute smart contracts. So, but these organizations are not scared to embed AI inside of their environment. They're like, we're going full speed ahead. And so, I think to weather the storm, you have to be cautious, but you have to scale with the efficiency because a small exchange worth 10 or 15 million can't compete with $1 trillion bank head to head. So like Sun Tzu said, is that you have to appear strong where your enemy is weak. And if I want to take business, then I'm either going to have to be smarter, stronger, or faster than you. And I can't be stronger than you, but Gen AI can help me be a lot smarter and a lot faster. So something to think about.
Yeah, great advice. So now that the last section is a lightning round where I ask you if something's underrated or overrated or frankly fairly rated. That's okay. And we'll kick it off with living in New York City, overrated or underrated.
Ooh, living or living adjacent, living near,
I'm gonna
or
go
new.
living in New York City. Yeah. So that includes all the taxes.
You know, I grew up in New York City, so I would not recommend anybody have a live there because it's just very expensive and it's not what it was. But that's me romanticizing my high school years in New York. So
Fair enough. Pen
well,
testing as a career path, underrated or overrated?
I think it's fairly rated. But I think what happens is I think that people are thinking that they're going to go into here and they're going to be like Project Sword, password swordfish, where they're typing really fast and doing these custom payloads to try and hack a network, and it's far less exciting than that. I mean, it's far, far less exciting than that. I mean, because you spend more time writing up the report and arguing with the people who are receiving the report than actually doing the testing. So
Yeah,
I
that
think it's
sounds like
fairly,
use for Gen AI right there.
so I think it's fairly rated, but I think that you really know what you're getting into.
Yeah. Cryptocurrency as an investment, underrated or overrated?
Highly underrated. Highly,
CrossFit,
highly underrated.
CrossFit as a lifestyle, underrated or overrated?
You said crusted?
CrossFit,
Oh, CrossFit.
exercise.
Oh,
Yeah.
underrated. I think more people should do CrossFit. It's so much fun.
Pursuing cybersecurity certifications like CISSP, underrated or overrated?
Oh man.
Well, like, would you recommend your friend do it if your friend wanted to get into the cybersecurity business, right? Like,
So I'll tell you how I did it. So CISSP was my last certification I did before I got hired, but I didn't have the 5 years experience. I just had a year's worth of study. So it was like running a 440 in 5 seconds. So like when people
wow.
saw that on my associate of ISC, CSSP on my resume, it was like they were bringing me in just to ask me how did I pass the test. And I was just like, I had great mentors who were like, you can do this. So I think that it's not what it used to be where it automatically opened up doors because so many people has it, but it is a great foundational framework to have you speak about it, live it, and see what your job is actually going to be in the long term. So I would say that it's probably overrated for opening doors right now, but highly underrated for everything else it brings, where it helps you to speak the framework, speak the language, understand what you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis and what it's going to look like.
Love that. Running outside instead of on a treadmill, underrated or overrated?
Is outside overrated or the inside?
Outside. Outside is
Oh, oh, that's severely underrated. Why do I feel like these are very tailored towards me?
Oh,
So
because they always are.
I don't know if you noticed, but I did. I used to run half marathons, and some of my best ideas came up when I was running. But the problem is that I didn't have anything to write it down with. So
You got to take your phone with you and start
got
writing
to
it
take
down
your
on your
phone with
phone.
you. But
Yeah.
highly underrated. I hate running indoors.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Just for the record, all of the underrated or overrated sections are customized for the guest on the
Okay.
show.
Okay.
So along those lines, Denmark for vacation, underrated or overrated?
Oh man, it depends on what you want out of life. I've been to some very exciting cities in the world, and I would tell you that Denmark was like coming home. It was the people there were so friendly. The lifestyle were amazing. I mean, the Higgy lifestyle, the lifestyle of contentment. I mean, it was like this city that was intermingled with like these 400-year-old buildings. People are on bikes. People are saying hello. You know, if you're lost, you can just ask somebody in the city. And it's not like a New York, like, grumpy. It was like, really a caring and contentment. And I was, and then the country is beautiful. I mean, water is there, they consider a natural resource. So the water I've drank in Denmark was some of the tastiest and freshest water. And I don't know if you're familiar with the South Street Seaport. They have this city called Aarhus, and the company I worked with, they had an office on the marina, and we had a engineering stand up where we just walked along the water. And I went and looked into the ocean, and you can see clear down. I said, "This water is so clear." And it was like, "Yeah, all these waters are protected because we consider our water a natural resource." And people were swimming in the water, like, and getting out and getting into these floating saunas. And they were like, "Oh, next time you come, you should try it." But it was amazing. It's not a fast, like, if you just like a slow, nice, I mean, you're a co-founder, so I'm sure you don't want any more excitement inside of your life when you vacation. So if you're at a point where you just want to have a nice, relaxing, a nice, warm meal with friendly people, Denmark is the place to go.
Working in the fashion industry, underrated or overrated?
Oh my God. Well,
No, no, yeah, I don't do my research.
wow. Yeah. So I'm from New York, so fashion was the New York lifestyle, especially in the '90s, and the iconography was a lot different. It wasn't about brands, but it was about creativeness. And I think with any industry, so cybersecurity, information security, technically my fourth profession. And so it was kind of a segue where I did wanted to do fashion, and I got exposed to it. And so I think what it comes down to is that, you have to really understand the ins and outs of like how to be successful inside of the business and understand if that's for you. So I think that making somebody look great and somebody feel comfortable is so underrated for fashion. But in order to do that consistently, you have to deal with so many other things that I thought was very overrated.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the creative part sounds amazing. Everything else sounds like hell.
Yeah.
Um, Jersey Mike's for lunch, underrated or overrated?
Ooh. I think that Jersey Mike's is underrated.
Yeah.
Their stuff is
So does
less
Danny
salty.
DeVito.
Right. Yeah. Their stuff is less salty than Blimpie. Uh, but Jersey Mike's, that's some good stuff, man.
Yeah. The cost, cybersecurity insurance, once you include the cost, underrated or overrated?
Professional liability cybersecurity insurance or business cybersecurity insurance?
Business. Business.
Underrated. Get it.
Yeah, you
Get
got to
it.
get it, right?
You got to get it. And even if you don't use it, just to have it, just in case, because a breach, man, it can cost a lot of money. A
Yeah,
lot
and
of money.
I'm going to throw out there there's multiple kinds of
Yeah.
cybersecurity insurance, as Kodjo was saying, and one of them also includes the people that are going to come help you too,
Right.
not just here's a pile of money, right? So if you're a
Right.
small financial institution, make sure you get the version where people come help you. So small commercial there. Smart homes, underrated or overrated?
um, Modular smart homes or static smart homes?
I'll go with modular. Sure.
Underrated. Underrated. Automation and LEDs will reduce your energy bill exponentially. And I'm a green person. So, I always think about the carbon footprint and how much I'm putting out, which is why I don't drive. Even though I live in Newark, I can have a car, so it's not in New York City, but it's New York City adjacent. It's just places to have it, but I don't drive because I would like to keep my carbon footprint very small.
Yeah. Living in the city helps with that for sure. And finally, the movie Amadeus, about obviously Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, underrated or overrated?
It is so underrated. I mean, it's a masterpiece. I mean, I don't know anybody I've showed that movie to that hasn't been awestruck from like, I say, give it 5 minutes. I guarantee you it will suck you in. And him, and it's a story about this guy, and it's historical fiction, but the way they present it is that this guy meets his foil, Salieri, and has to live with knowing his foil exists and that his foil is so much more brilliant than he is. And he doesn't know what to do with this. He's like, I've given up everything to be the best, and all I've asked was for you to make me the best musician, and you've given it to this person who's just puerile, debaucherous, lustful, and he's like, I've been the most upstanding, child of God ever, and you give your talents to him, and he's like, I can't fight you, but I can fight him, and it's just one of those things that if he had of him, and towards the end of it, where you see that he begins to embrace the genius, and he says, you know what, and you can kind of see the look of the kind of the look of reflective regret, where he's like, hey, if I only had done this in the beginning, I could have touched the sky with him. You know what I mean? Like Daedalus and his no Icarus and his dad. Where you can't always be the genius in a room, but you can be near the genius, and that genius can you may not go to the stars, but it can take you to the moon. So totally underrated. If you ever watch it, I mean, it is fantastic. The soundtrack, Don Giovanni, the dirge, the march. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, I've seen it several times as well.
Yeah, I
I would
love that
agree with
feeling.
you. Underrated.
Totally underrated, especially if you're creative, a person who is, like us, who are trying to be visionaries inside of this market, and sometimes you get that imposter syndrome, and sometimes you have to sit back and say, am I really cut out for this? There's people that's far smarter than I am, and you say, you know what, I'm just going to go pick their brain, and then you sit next to them, you say,
Yeah,
well, yeah, right,
exactly.
like,
If you can't beat them, join them, right? Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. Anyway, it's been an awesome show, Kojo. Thanks for coming on the show. This has been Kojo Hogan, Information Security Risk and Compliance Executive. That was so awesome and great to see you, Kojo.
Thanks, Alec. It's so great to see you too. Amazing. Anything I can do to help, looking forward to keep on picking your brain and collaborating on many things in the future.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.